Hello, I'm Jack Pike for the WIHS Journal program, and this is part 2 of my discussion with Jessica Rodgers, who is the Coalition's Director for the Patients' Rights Action Fund. And when we ended part 1, we were talking about the effect of assisted suicide on patients with disabilities.
You can be eligible even if your condition is treatable, but you just can't access treatment. So for people who have disabilities that have so consistently had to fight within the medical profession to be viewed as having an equal quality of life, to fight for the basic dignity that other patients without disabilities receive in the doctor's office, this is of particular concern because they know that they are too often and so often treated differently and viewed as having a life that other people simply wouldn't want to live. So when you couple that with a government policy that creates an incentive for insurance companies to deny care in favor of cheaper lethal drugs, when you have conditions, as many people with disabilities do, that are treatable but require consistent treatment and sometimes more expensive treatment, you're really creating a perfect storm that puts people with disabilities directly in the crosshairs, where they may very well end up backed into a corner feeling like this is not just a choice, but the only choice that they really have.
Yeah, and this has also been important for those Hispanic groups and people of color in the state to understand this. And of course, in other states, as you know, there have been instances where people have been denied treatment for their cancer, and the insurance company said, well, we'll pay for the medicine for you to take your life. So this is just expanding as we go. We were talking before about Canada's current climate, and of course they passed that in 2016 or 2015, and now it's remarkable. You talk about how things get expanded. They have now eclipsed every other country in the world in causing death by assisted suicide and euthanasia. Euthanasia is when a doctor actively takes your life, not you're taking your own meds or you're taking it. And what started out 9 years ago has just blossomed into full-blown eradication of people that I think in many ways bordering on eugenics.
I would agree with that entirely. Yeah. It is now the 5th leading cause of death, pardon me, it accounts for 5%, there we go, of Canada's deaths.
Yes.
I mean, that is astonishing.
And they're also pushing legislation, even as a couple of years ago, and this may have already taken place, where they're wanting to now include mature minors, if you will, and infants with severe disabilities. And you're seeing that slippery slope that's taking place up there, which is, again, a eugenics type of thing. But people have to look at that and realize that what's taking place there is at some point going to happen here in their state. And they need to be willing to take action and to call their legislators. And that's what this whole discussion is about for people that are listening to us today, that when this legislation comes up, and it likely will come up in next year when the legislative session starts, I think it's February 4th, that there's going to be a bill. I have no doubt there's going to be bills for this, and to stand up and to let their representatives and their senators know within the state that they do not want this and that we can defeat it again. And because the proponent of this, as you well know, Compassionate Choices, will spend a lot of money to try to get this across the finish line, and we need to continue to oppose that. You know, one other issue that has also been kind of coming up nowadays, and that is the use of assisted suicide with organ harvesting. There's such a dearth of available organs that now they're even looking at this as part of assisted suicide. So these things are just burgeoning.
Absolutely. And once you have that utilitarian view of your neighbors, that really is the natural progression of things.
Right.
We saw in Canada that they initially, as you noted, just very few short years ago, really started exactly where a lot of the U.S. laws have started, where it was for quote-unquote terminal illness.
Yeah.
And they realized pretty quickly how much money they would save when they expanded the criteria, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me at all that they are looking at our neighbors as commodities and as financial figures as opposed to human beings that should be treated with true dignity.
Right. For many of us, we look at not only the dignity of a human being, but that we are imago Dei, we are created in the image of God, and that there is a dignity to each person, and they have that right to that, and not to have this forced on them. And it does happen with elderly people. Well, very often the right to die suddenly becomes the duty to die, and very often they're pushed into this by, for sometimes monetary means, families or others who are wanting to gain access to their estate and so on. These things are happening around, and we need to be actively working to get this. This has been a really good discussion. I'd like to give some information for PRAF for our listeners, and any suggestions you have for my listeners, because as I said, we stream live on the internet, and so we have listeners in other states, actually even in other countries. We have listeners, and we'll be perhaps hearing this to look at their own state to find out what is going on in their state regarding this. So what would you have to tell them?
I would say you can go to our website at patientsrightsaction.org, and you can quickly see where there has been active legislation this year. You can learn more about the issue, really get the facts on what assisted suicide is and the risks that it poses. And if you're listening to this and you think, wow, I had no idea, and I think, my friends don't know, my community groups don't know, my local church doesn't know, feel free to reach out. Let's have a conversation. Let's figure out together how we can educate your neighbors and your friends and your church groups to really activate people on this. Because in my experience, the more people learn, the more they oppose. And we need people to make phone calls and to reach out to their legislators and their governors and say, we don't want this.
Right. And I would also say from a local standpoint that because we will have people who are pastoral staff that will be perhaps listening to this, that I have always made myself available to speak about this at churches. And so if there are pastors or elders in churches that would like to have this discussed in their church, I'm happy if they would contact me here at WIHS, and our number is 860-346-1049. Jessica, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me about this, and we look forward to talking to you one of these days again in our coalition call. But thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
It is a pleasure, as always, and the work that you have done and continue to do is helping to keep Connecticut safe. So I just have so much appreciation for you, and I'm sure that your listeners do as well.
Thank you, Jessica. Have a great day.
You too.
You have been listening to part 2 of my discussion with Jessica Rodgers from the Patients' Rights Action Fund regarding the issue of assisted suicide in the United States and especially in Connecticut. If you would like more information from Jessica, you can reach her at patientsrightsaction.org. That's patientsrightsaction.org. Or you can contact us here at WIHS at 860-346-1049. Thank you for listening to this journal program. I'm Jack Pike for WIHS News and Information.